nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, if you please, the roll call.
Vice Mayor Marriott. Here. Commissioner Robinson.
Here.
Commissioner Ruznicki.
Here.
Commissioner Maldonado.
Here.
And Mayor Petrilla.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda as proposed?
Yes, I'd like to pull item 4D to an action for discussion, and then I have a discussion item.
Just a reminder to the commission, we changed the process that consent items would be pulled during the consent calendar and discussed as part of the consent calendar approval.
Thank you.
I do have 2 amendment requests.
Okay.
If we could move item 6B to be the first presentation ahead of, the first ordinance ahead of the presentations, and then move item 5A after 6B before presentations, as well as an action item.
Okay, so we would have the 6B, 6A, then the 2 presentations, and then everything else. All right, any other
It
amendment?
would be 6B and then 5A.
Yes, 5A, yep. Commissioner.
Item for discussion.
Go ahead.
That was going to be regarding the beach ordinance, and as far as the staging of that, I've had some community
Okay.
folks ask about that.
Commissioner Ruznicki?
Just to get a clarifier, and you can help me with this, Mayor, because maybe I was on vacation, I didn't hear it, I didn't catch it. What is it that we do with the consent? We have to do it before the meeting? Is that what you
No,
meant?
so when the consent calendar comes up for consideration, the mayor will call if any of the consent, for a motion on the consent, and then you can pull the item then.
Oh, at that
And then
moment.
there's a motion for the rest
Okay.
of
I
the
thought when you
items.
said calendar, like with our emails that we were, okay. Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
I second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Marriott.
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson.
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki.
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado.
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next we have the first item is 6A, first reading of ordinance 2025-15, emergency bridge loan.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. I'm Devin Schmidt, Finance Director for the City of St. Pete Beach. Before you this evening, we do have a presentation.
I'm supposed to read the header, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
We moved it up. An ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach authorizing a loan from the State of Florida Department of Commerce in the principal amount of not exceeding $16 million in order to finance or reimburse operating costs incurred or to be incurred by the city in connection with Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Authorizing the execution and delivery of a loan agreement in connection with such loan, authorizing the issuance of a promissory note to evidence such loan, delegating certain authority to the mayor, the city manager, and other officials to accomplish the foregoing, providing for severability, codification, and scrivener's errors, and providing for an effective date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So previously, this commission has gone through the application process and completed steps for this emergency bridge loan. Where we are at to date is looking at the application process and the ordinance process. The staff team and the advisory team that worked on this project was myself, our city attorney, our city manager, and we also worked with our bond counsel and financial advisor. For our bond counsel, we worked with Steve Miller and Jeffrey Larson, our financial advisor, who is here today if the commission has any questions. So our initial estimates when we were originally looking at this emergency bridge loan application, this is showing any revenue shortfalls that were projected as a result of Helene and Milton. This was right after the storm, and so the total amount in each one of those different funds is just under $16 million. Today, our current plan with our bond counsel and financial advisor recommendation is that this borrowing would really serve as a cushion for the city to work through our effects in the general fund and our wastewater utility. The draws on the account would be done in arrears following any evidence from the finance director that a shortfall exists and that is either impeding our city's ability to meet our operating cash flow obligations or have our fund balances to fall below an acceptable level, typically 2 to 3 months of operating expenses. So what we're looking at today, and as you saw at our budget workshop meeting, we would be looking to utilize this as a cushion if we were to have another event or 2 events like we experienced last fall. So that would be the intent of our plan. So following our fiscal year 2026, we will work to determine how much of the funds have been used, if any. We'll utilize any of the unused portions of the loan proceeds to prepay the state loan, and then lay out a repayment plan for a final maturity date and for any annual repayments of the loan that the city can meet. So the purpose of this ordinance is authorization of the loan from the state of Florida to support the city's operating costs. This is specifically for operating costs, not for capital. The loan is set to a principal amount not to exceed $16 million, and that's to cover any of those costs that we previously incurred with Helene and Milton, or if we were to have another storm disaster. The ordinance delegates our authority to various city officials, and it handles the execution and delivery of the loan agreement. We had previously discussed this, but a little bit about what the loan program helps to manage. The government operations, so this is any cost associated with continuing, expanding, or modifying the local government's operations to meet any disaster-related need, and includes costs such as, but not limited to, staff salaries and payroll or operations. It's meant for this is the reason for this is because of the impacts of Hurricane Helene and Milton, and any operations if we were to have another event, and then that obtaining the loan ensures that the city can continue to provide our essential services to our citizens. The repayment terms, so the loan will be repaid from any legally available non-ad valorem revenues, ensuring our financial responsibility. For the legislative findings, the recitals have been adopted that outline the city's commission's purpose and intent. And exception of ad valorem power, so the city's ad valorem taxing power will not be needed to authorize the loan repayment. So again, the loan amount is looking at an amount not to exceed $16 million from the state. The city manager is responsible for determining any specific principal amount with the financial advice, and the financial advisor will provide advice to help us determine the loan's principal amount. The promissory note approval, so the execution of the promissory note is essential to the evidence of the loan under this agreement. The mayor is authorized to execute and deliver the promissory note and approve modifications, and the note maturity and interest rate would be 120 months and an interest rate of 0% until maturity. Limited obligation, so the city's obligation to repay the note is limited under special delivery defined in the loan agreement. Repayment has to be sourced from available non-ad valorem revenues, and the obligation does not create a lien on any properties for the city, ensuring no claim on assets. For the debt service on the note, that's managed within the budget and authorized by the commission. The state requirements are that the city must maintain the loan proceeds in a separate bank account to ensure proper management and compliance. Any interest on unearned expected loan proceeds must remain at the state funds, and they must be outlined in the loan agreement. The city can invest amounts in the debt service fund in accordance with the investment policies and regulations. So with that, is there any questions that we can answer for you?
Thank you. Comments, questions? So this is a 10-year loan at 0 interest.
Correct.
I hate to say this, but it sounded like there was no recourse. This is a non-recourse loan. Is that?
My name is Jeff Larson. Larson Consulting Services. I'm the financial advisor to the city. Good to see everybody.
Hello.
non-recourse loan? I'm trying to understand.
I'm saying it's, it's not attached to any property.
No.
It's not that there are no penalties that I saw.
If you don't pay them back.
If something were to happen, if something, I'm thinking in terms of, it's a 10-year loan, no interest, it costs us nothing to take this money, we put the money in the bank account, we don't use it, great, we give it back. Right.
And-
If something happens, we have catastrophic something, right? Let's say 9.5 years from now, something catastrophic happens, and we're not able to repay the loan at that point. What happens at that point?
Well, as your financial advisor, the memo I gave staff really assumes that after 2025 and 2026, we will know within a month or so, at the end of those fiscal years, how much you've actually needed to replenish additional expenses or reduced revenues. Okay? So let's say it's $1.5 million. Okay, look, if you borrowed $1.5 million, then I'm going to strongly recommend that I'll come back here with staff and say, okay, we now have 8 years to repay this without putting an undue burden. It's not free, there's no interest, but you got to repay the principal in a bullet amount, or over time. You can, we confirm with the state, you can pay it back over time, you can prepay it. So we would come to you and recommend, as part of your budgeting process, that we have 8 years to pay back $1.5 million. And that would become part of your budget process. So at the end of 10 years, if not sooner, you would owe them $0. There is no penalty. What is being pledged are your legally available non-ad valorem revenues. That excludes property taxes, it excludes grants and things that are not legally available. So all the other non-ad valorem revenues would be used as a source to pay you back. It does limit your ability to do other things. They have approval to approve other loans. The good news is it's 0% interest rate, okay? I can't do better than that if I went and got you a bank loan for the city or a bond issue. What we've recommended to your finance director is on a regular basis that money can be invested, say at 4%, $15 million at 4%, or $16 million is a good bit of money. So I would recommend the interest earnings be taken out of there, swept out of there on a monthly basis to be used to shore up any revenue. You have had revenue decreases. You just went through your situation there, both in the general fund as well as wastewater fund. So I would not let interest earnings stay there. I would draw those out on a monthly basis so you utilize those as the intent is there. Then when you go back to pay them, all you're looking at is what is the principal amount that you've used. It isn't a separate fund. It will be monitored, and we'll work closely with Devin in terms of the plan. So I'd love it if you didn't need any of it. I think you'll need some of it. Your general fund balance of $8 million is 2 to 3 months of operating expenses. That's real tight. So this is also kind of a sleep at night cushion for you. I wouldn't want that fund to go less than that. I'd wish it to be higher, because if there's a storm, what are you going to do? You don't want to have to run out to a bank on an emergency basis and borrow money. So I would watch both what you could use it for interest earnings. We'll get together in a month or so, and it'll close after your second hearing. We've already reviewed the documents with the attorneys and the state and bond counsel. We'll try to close it sometime in the month of August with your city attorney's help. And you'll fully borrow it. It'll sit in an account. We'll sweep out interest. We'll figure out with the city manager and the finance director how much you really need. And I'm not close enough to know what that number might be.
Thank you, sir.
Hope that helps.
Thank you,
It's great the state has it.
for sure.
It lets you sleep at night, too. So.
Yep.
Thank you.
City Clerk, do we have any public comments?
Following the item up for me, because I fly to New York tomorrow morning early with another.
Of course.
I have no public comment on this topic.
Okay. Any further discussion? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve first reading of ordinance 2025-15.
Second?
City Clerk?
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosnicki,
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
and Mayor Petrilla.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have item 5A, authorizing agreement with Santec for Community Redevelopment Area, CRA study.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Laura Canary, Community Development Director. So this evening, we're going to have a presentation from Gil Martinez, who's going to give an overview of the CRA and kind of the process and then the purpose of the finding of necessity. We also have with us this evening representatives from FIBER, which is the Florida Institute for Built Environmental Resilience. We're so appreciative to be partnering with them and hope to continue partnering with them on the creation and establishment of the CRA, as this would really be the first CRA on one of the barrier islands here in Pinellas County, and it would be, again, very resiliency and infrastructure centric. And we also have Matt Lewis from Stantec available as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Gil to give the overview, and then Fiber's going to go into a brief presentation on about what they do, and then, again, we'll all be available for questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Pleasure to see you all. Gil Martinez, Senior Planner with Community Development. With Community Development. I already caught up myself. Before I start, I just want to address that when we are considering a community redevelopment agency, we are really looking at resiliency elements, things that we learned from the past storms, things that we want to avoid, securities that we'd like to have in place for tools to continue to harden our infrastructure system, which is currently overloaded, as we well know. So the primary purpose of tonight's discussion is to get your approval to move forward with a finding of necessity to assess whether we even come close to, being considered for a CRA designation. So what is a CRA? Established under Florida Chapter 163, Part 2, a community redevelopment agency, CRA, is a public agency created by a local government to revitalize areas facing economic issues, declines, blight, or infrastructure challenges. Its mission is to improve physical conditions, attract private investment, and enhance the quality of life in designated redevelopment zones. St. Pete Beach, why a CRA? What we are considering here is a resiliency-based CRA, where its primary purpose is to find resources to address our infrastructure system. So what we're looking at is a resiliency-based CRA designation so that we can strengthen and modernize aging infrastructure and vulnerable to sea level rise and climate change, proactively harden critical systems to ensure long-term community resilience and public safety, address blight through strategic improvements that enhance environmental sustainability of quality of life, attract and coordinate investments supporting sustainable economic growth within the CRA, improve infrastructure performance while reducing environmental risks like flooding, and leverage funding. How is a CRA established? Well, the first step in establishing a CRA is to identify that there are signs of blight as defined in Florida statute. In our instance, we're looking at infrastructure, we're looking at inadequate roadways and utilities, environmental contaminations perhaps, and unsafe and unhealthy conditions. A documentation of a finding of necessity is a report that must be prepared to document these conditions. We have, in community development, we've been working very closely with Public Works, with Camden, and we've identified an area that is potential, this is not written in stone, is a potential area for a CRA because it aligns with over 22 capital improvement projects. To the north, the area is bound at 87th Ave. To the south, it is bound on 37th Ave. It is contiguous along Gulf Boulevard as well as Blind Pass Road. It is a designated zone created by the local government to address blight, infrastructure deficiencies, and long-term resiliency. Oh. This is a map of the CRA infrastructure map. I think there's been a glitch here in this presentation. There was more information here. There are over 22 projects associated with this map. It's an interactive map that we will hope to unfold as we move forward. A finding of necessity must clearly demonstrate the presence of blight and justify the creation of a CRA under the law. The report is presented to the local government, the City Commission, and the Board of County Commissioners. Adoption of a resolution declaring the need for a CRA, the governing body, i.e. the city and the county, votes to adopt a resolution confirming the area meets the criteria for a CRA need. The action establishes the intent to create a CRA and move forward with planning. So once we've established the finding of necessity and you agree that, you know, the area is blighted enough to move forward with the CRA, the next step is to develop the community redevelopment plan. And within this plan, we need to be able to display what the proposed infrastructure improvements are going to be, what public facilities will be addressed, what is the funding mechanism that we're going to employ. We usually, you see predominantly that most CRAs employ tax increment financing. There's a great deal of community engagement that goes on and input, defines timelines, goals, and performance metrics, and must align with local comprehensive plans. Plan adoption, once, you know, we've established these, we move on to the plan adoption phase, and this establishes a CRA and its boundaries. It creates the trust fund revenue for the TIF and establishes the CRA governing board. It also requires coordination with other agencies. In this instance, if we are working with the county, it would require an interlocal agreement with the county so that we can move forward with the use of TIF revenues. Once the CRA is established, the formal notification must be provided to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity and all relevant taxing authorities. So the question here is tax increment financing. What is it, and why would we want to explore it? Well, primarily it's because, as I will show you in the following slide, it gives us an opportunities to capture county revenues that otherwise we would not have access to for the purpose of addressing our infrastructure and to promote long-term resiliency of the barrier island. TIF captures the increase in property tax revenue within the CRA above the base year. So if you look at the graph here, you start at a CRA starts on the left-hand side, and there's the base year. So I will show you in the following slide how this works out. As the property values rise due to redevelopment, the increment, i.e. the difference, is reinvested into the area to fund improvements, while taxes on the base year value continue going to the original taxing authorities. Here is an example of a 5-year projection with a 50% county participation. These are example numbers. They're not based on any reality whatsoever. We picked $200 million as the base year at a 3% increase. So you have an incremental value of $6 million in your first year. So you project those figures out over 5 years, and you have a district which, with a $200 million base year starting point, can now generate TIF up to $466,000. Over 5 years, the county contribution on that is $210,000. Currently, we cannot access those monies because we are not a CRA. Otherwise, we're not, we can't address our capital projects within the district. So we implement the CRA and begin redevelopment activities. Should you all approve this? This would allow the CRA to do the following things. It would be able to enter into contracts, acquire and dispose of property, apply for grants, issue bonds, and use the TIF funds for capital improvements and public-private partnerships. That concludes my portion of the presentation as it relates to a finding of necessity, why we need it, what TIF is, and the primary focus of why we're considering this is because we want to introduce resiliency and be able to address our infrastructure issues. With that, we have Jeff Carney with the University of Florida, who is here with us today, graciously came out to speak to us about resiliency measures that are being taken throughout the state and some examples and how we can partner with them.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good to see you all. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk particularly about the CRA, but really also generally about fiber's work. We were very happy to have your mayor and your city manager join us for a workshop, a city resilience workshop at the University of Florida a few months ago, and so hopefully have the opportunity to carry some of this work forward in the future. So a little bit, I'll talk about Cedar Key as an example, but the first slide I'll show you is our general overview slide for the Institute. We are 6 faculty members across the College of Design, Construction, Planning, plus an affiliate faculty from across all of University of Florida, and from health to engineering to sort of a broad range of people. The mission is to build knowledge of the intersection of research, application, and lived experience around ideas and innovations that foster built environment resilience. As you can see from the map, we have research projects really across the state right now. The focus of the Institute is really on research, so we work with the National Science Foundation and large family foundations to generate research. That research is applied in communities, and that's a real hallmark of our work, is that we're really working to get that work out of the lab and into the hands of our communities. And then third, of course, we're the University of Florida, so we're training the next generation of professionals, whether that's planners, landscape architects, city managers, interior designers. Those are our fields in the College of Design, Construction, Planning. And so we have a series of labs from the Florida Resilient Cities Lab, which is really our arm that gets projects into communities. We're funded through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and others are really trying to apply the work. The Urban Agility Lab is looking at big data and smart city technologies. Disaster Trust and Social Change Lab works with a lot of communities across the state that oftentimes are cut out of these processes. A lot of communities that have had a hard time having a voice, so really reaching communities where they are. The Adaptive Built Environments Lab looks at energy conservation, building technologies, everything from HVAC to solar systems. The Design Dynamics Lab is health in the built environment. GatorCorps is an AmeriCorps program that actually places student volunteers for 6 months up to a year in communities across the state to do service work. And then the Gulf South Studio is our studio where we teach around different communities. And so it's the real overview of what fiber does. But what I was going to talk about specifically was the work we've done in Cedar Key. And I think hopefully everybody's familiar with Cedar Key, small community in the Big Bend region, has been hit pretty hard over the last couple of years by storms. You know, when you see Jim Cantore in the picture that you've had a couple storms. And so I gave Gil way too many slides, so he's pared it down to like 1. But I'll tell you what we've done there over the course of the last couple of years. We had an FDEP Resilient Florida grant to do a vulnerability assessment. This is really the assess and the map part of this, where we did, which I know Pinellas County has a vulnerability assessment, same process. Where we built the GIS layers of all of the different assets. We brought those to the community, did a series of engagements to get the reaction and the input from the community. all of that was done in a three-dimensional tool. One of the advances that we brought to this was to build a three-dimensional visualization of those vulnerabilities. In doing that, really, I'd say for the intention of taking action. From the beginning, it was about taking action. And so having your vulnerabilities in a three-dimensional form allowed people to kind of really engage the vulnerabilities and really understand their own risks. And so when we got to the taking action part, that led to the resilience plan. So a series of projects emerged out of the effort. But even at that point, and when we finished the project, the community wanted to know how we were going to implement this work. And at that point, they said, well, we have our CRA, which is 20-something years old and needs to be redone. And so they had to reinitiate the CRA process. So they hired us in our law clinic, to redo the CRA and incorporate the resilience projects into that. So we took our vulnerability assessment, we took our adaptation action area plan projects, about 85 projects, and brought those directly into the CRA. So I think that what the city's doing is a really interesting and an appropriate way to move resilience-based work towards implementation and really start to I think, economically see the benefits of resilience. And so here, just a couple of the things that we've done. There was everything from the vulnerability design projects that led into the adaptation plan, which now has resulted in the CRA for the city of Cedar Key. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for the invitation to come out to UF. One of the things that I sincerely appreciate about what your program does is really that connection between not just the theoretical, intellectual, but rather putting into practice. And so thank you for that very much.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. We really enjoyed the process and hope to do it again. And think about opportunities that come up. We'd love to talk more about futures. So
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, questions, comments, discussion?
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to kind of tie it up with, from this point on, so what we're asking for is approval to move forward with the finding of necessity study. Once the study is conducted, that'll basically give us, again, we assume based on everything that we know that we can show that need, but really what the FON is doing is documenting current conditions. Of course, you always do risk that you can document the conditions, we can get so far, and then once we get working with the county, things could change. So the question becomes, well, what does that FON then do for you at that point? Again, it's still really documenting the conditions and the needs here, and it would give us that tool that whether we were looking for other grant opportunities or whatever that may be, we don't lose that information and research. I think it gets used moving forward regardless. Should we move forward and decide that, okay, the next step is going to be to actually develop and establish the CRA, step one would be a very robust community engagement process, hence it's in the name, community redevelopment, but from start to finish, we would start with just really, even at the FON step, just informing and engaging the community and letting them know what the FON is and what exactly it's going to be looking at. But the real meat and potatoes would be for community engagement would be as we develop the redevelopment plan. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, are there any audience comments?
Yes, Deb Scheckner.
Y'all weren't fast enough with your lights.
Good evening, Deborah Scheckner, Boca Isle Drive in St. Pete Beach. We did try to get a CRA many, many years ago. I think maybe Lisa remembers all of that. He did mention something about acquiring properties. Now, I do believe eminent domain has been taken out of this new CRA, but I'm not sure, so that is a question I have that I think is very important for our community. We are blighting a huge part of our community, and if somebody has a house or a building there, if it's being sold, I do believe they have to say that it's blighted. So, that's another issue that we have. Residents need to buy in, maybe even before we spend this money. Do they want a CRA? What are the benefits? We know what that is, but what are the cons? And the last time around, there were so many cons that it just fell on deaf ears, and we did not go forward with it. So I kind of would like to look at some of that. I understand resiliency, infrastructure, all those things are important, but not if we're going to force people to sell their property, and that would be at current value, which is, of course, lower now than it has been in a very, very long time. And, we have to realize our real estate taxes for the next upcoming year are not going to be what they are in the past year. Not only because residents will go before the tax assessor and get their assessment lowered, but also the tax assessor will come around and take a look at what we look at like right now and possibly change some things. So I wonder if we could have a buy-in, perhaps, before we spend the money, a little workshop, something so that people really understand what they're getting into. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura? Commissioner Marriott?
Thanks. So my questions were going to be very much the same as Ms. Schuckner's. It all sounds fantastic, right? It's like the answer to a lot of our problems. But what is the downside, and what is the consequence of having that finding of necessity and declaring an area blighted, and then the interlocal agreement falls through, or what is the consequence for people who own property in those areas if the finding of necessity finds it as blighted, but then we can't move forward on the next steps?
So there's a few things to unpack with the comments and questions. So first and foremost, when we talk about blighted, and again, that's per the statutory definition, I really like to use the example of St. Augustine, the historic area, that CRA, because it's one that I've personally worked in, and I think it's a perfect example of what you don't consider as being slum and blighted when you think of an area. However, that CRA was founded on transportation and parking blight, very specifically, and because hence the roadways down in St. Augustine and parking, which they didn't have, they were able to create the redevelopment agency, and then they built the parking garage, and then obviously the revenue from that now goes back into that area. So number one is, I think that you always, yes, I wish the term blighted could be changed just like brownfield, because with all the positive that can come with remediation to a brownfield, you still have that negative connotation of, oh, you're on a brownfield. So I've tried to flip the script of when any homeowner or property owner has been, interested or wanting to know more about what that means if a property is in a CRA, I say that it's a targeted investment area, and that that a portion of the taxes that you pay are absolutely going to be recycled back into that area. You can't really guarantee that for those outside of the area always. So that's how I kind of try and flip the script a little bit. As far as the downside, and what you hear is that the concern of, well, if you put the funds in the CRA, now you're directing them away from the general fund, and you lose that flexibility of being able to expend them on whatever that may be. I'll use a very simplified example, but when we talk about what TIF can be expended on, there's the statute criteria, but then in addition to that, Pinellas County, being a charter county, has put their own policy in place of what they'd like to see county TIF expended on. And the county TIF expenditure that they want to see is, again, those buckets of transportation, mobility, housing, infrastructure. So it's very specific. And really, they did that in essence because as some of the CRAs got more and more successful and had more funding available, they kind of deviated away, unfortunately, from what they were intended for. So maybe you saw more banners going up. Not saying that banners are a bad thing, but again, deviating away from the purpose. So about 5 years ago, the county created their own criteria of what they would like to see county TIF expended on. So I like to use the really simplified example of my kid's going to the store and has $10 to spend at the convenience store. I'm going to give them $10 too, but I tell them, I'm going to give you $10, but you can't spend it on gum. Does he turn down the 10, does he not want the 20 because now he can't buy gum, or does he want the 20? And again, here's the caveat. $10 as original 10 can still be spent on the gum. Like in this case, the money that we have can still be expended on anything within that area outside of the county TIF's allowance. Now, when it comes down to, okay, well, what about that it can't be expended outside of that area? Well, that's where we really need to strategize, and as we're developing the redevelopment plan, identify projects such as the lift station that we know, yes, it's in the CRA, but we know that the benefit is for the entire city. And that's how we'd and so it becomes a little bit of a shuffling game, because you know that maybe you have some restrictions on the TIF over here. Okay, well then let's plan accordingly to know that over here is the need, and we have it in the general fund, and this is an allowable expenditure because there's no, restrictions on that. So let's pay for this over here with general fund and CRA, for what is allowed. And that's also why a lot of times in moving forward, as if we were to be, creating more of a trust fund balance, and we had, really we needed to roadmap out what that looks like, you would see some probably significant projects having a cost share. You would see a CRA contribution and a city contribution for certain projects as it's captured in the CIP.
Okay, and then I think the only thing that because there was a lot in my question.
Yeah,
so
there's something I missed. I know I missed something.
Yeah, so the part I left that got left out is what happens if we have a finding of necessity, but then nothing happens after that? Is there a disadvantage for any property owners in the area if a finding of necessity has happened, but then the CRA for whatever reason doesn't move forward? Is there a disadvantage for any of those property owners?
No, there is not. No, there is not. And it's and one other important note to that's worth mentioning is the CRA boundary is not parcel specific. So when you look at that boundary, you're not necessarily saying that every property in there is slum and blighted, because I've worked in many CRAs where you'll have, $1 million property, and next to it, that slum and blighted property that maybe was used for the imagery for the finding of necessity. And so we're very careful in saying that an FON is not parcel specific. We're looking at the overall area and acknowledging that these conditions exist, and that's why this area needs some extra attention. The one other thing that I forgot to touch on was, as far as the acquisition of property, and I think that sometimes that gets confused with like an eminent domain. What the statute is saying is that a CRA has the flexibility to acquire property and dispose of property as a separate entity from the city. The nice thing of where I've seen it really it's been used well as an economic development tool is that often if the city or municipality owns a property and they're disposing of it, it's in the best interest of the constituents, right, to usually get highest and best use, or whatever that may look like, right? So you want wherever's going to give you the most revenue. The CRA has a little bit more flexibility in that they can really capture and consider the public benefit of what that, project is bringing to the community. So what I mean by that is you could potentially purchase a property for, say, $1 million, the CRA could, and then through an RFP process, put that property out to the public and say, here's the property that we're making available, but we want parking garage, whatever, name your criteria of what you want in that project. And then you could potentially, you could let that property go for a lot of times, maybe it's $500,000 rather than the $1 million, because you're getting that public benefit in turn for that investment. So that's why they put so much emphasis on the acquisition part, is just that it allows the CRA just has a little bit more flexibility in how it can evaluate those proposals.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, the CRAs can no longer use eminent domain. It has to be a voluntary acquisition. That changed after the Supreme Court case in Kelo, and there was a legislative response. So in Florida, we can no longer do that.
It's very important. Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
In St. Augustine, was that the historic district?
Yes.
Okay. Did it have a lot of residential to it?
No, they actually have a second CRA, the Lincolnville CRA, which is outside of that is primarily the residential one. And then now they just have created a third CRA, the West City, which is, I think, a combination of residential and commercial. But the historic area is predominantly commercial.
And what did that do to its property values?
I can't answer that, but what I can tell you, and if you look, I think at the appropriate time, we'll definitely introduce this, should we move forward. But, so right now, if you go and look at if you go to the property appraiser's site and then pull up the VAB, you can look at, historically over the years of what kind of valuation increases you've seen in any of the municipalities. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, you can see the TIF districts within the county. And you can see how, I'm just throwing this as an example, maybe traditionally, like in, say, I'll use Pinellas Park as an example, you may see the average valuation at 7% increase. But then in the CRA, you'll see like a 12 or 13. And again, that's the whole purpose, is the intent of putting that shot in the arm of investment, just extra attention to that area to increase the valuations, to increase the TIF, to then be able to reinvest more in that area.
Well, I just know that back when we had the real estate bust here, it was about 5 years for it was the drop, continual drop. It was 2008 to 12 that it just continually dropped down. Why are we doing this now, right after a hurricane, when all the property values are low?
So you want to create when it's lower, essentially, but to your point, Commissioner Robinson, there have been instances where a CRA is established and they don't realize a TIF maybe, for the first 5 years, 10 years. In Clearwater, they actually reset the base year because in their second CRA, they had their main CRA in the downtown area, their second CRA area in the East Gateway area was not generating any TIF because it was created right around the time of the recession. So then they ended up going back, resetting the base year to move it up to, because they had, even going up a little, it hadn't met that threshold of what it was at in the base for the base year. So they worked with the county, reset it to get that base. But you're absolutely right, they are low now. So all the more reason why, if we were in a situation where we continue to see them decline, then we would want to talk about a base year, looking at what that base year set would be. But as of right now, I would say that now's the time to try and capture those valuations.
Why is there's nothing on Paso Grill on this? Why is Paso Grill not included and on the map?
So this is, again, just the study area boundary, and this is what was pulled in talking with Public Services and looking at some of the infrastructure improvements projects that we already knew were online or coming online. We are limited to, cannot be more than 80% of the total geographical area of the city. I don't believe that we're near that threshold quite yet. I'll confirm with you. Yes, we're under that. But again, if it was, if the commission's direction was to, as we're looking at that boundary, the nice thing is, in moving forward, we start with that area, but it's subject to change, whether it's that there's additional parcels, 1 or 2, that we should capture on the north end or the south end, or if it makes sense per the direction that you all give us to say, hey, don't exceed the 80 or don't even get to 50, but look at this area too. That's something that can absolutely be considered. And again, the nice thing is as long as it's contiguous and you can document those conditions in that area, it doesn't have to be on every parcel within that area.
My concern would be, I understand the tool that it is and the potential it has. It can be used very well and it can be used very poorly. And my concern is just like Ms. Schechner's, is the fact that I think there needs to be community buy-in before we go spending money on stuff. My concern is people need to understand that right now they're looking at low values on their homes, and what is it going to do to them to now be called blighted or be in a blighted area? Maybe their home isn't blighted, but they're in a blighted area. I would like to see community buy-in before we go spending $21,000. On top of that, I know that it does take away from the general fund, and I believe here on this, which I got 2 different versions of this. The one presentation had a $466,000, and this one has a 301, but regardless, that difference, that delta is what we do not see at all into the general fund. So that is my concern. We have so many capital projects that need to get done. And again, another concern is you have somebody that lives on Bogasega Isles Drive that gets flooded, and they're not even part of this, and they're going to see monies being spent over on other areas that they've been begging for stuff to, for work done. and their capital improvement projects done. I just have a lot of concern. I think people need to know and buy into this before we go any further and before we spend $21,000. That would be my concern.
I would be reluctant to want to do too much, heavy community engagement and outreach at this point, simply because at this point with the FON, it is pretty matter of fact. It's an objective process. They're looking at documenting the conditions. Yes, they can look at things and maybe get a little creative in the report. I mean, Tarpon Springs just put it together, a great one, but it really is pretty objective. And then so I would say the last thing that I would hate to engage the community, get them excited, or thinking that something's going to go in this direction, and then the finding of necessity comes back and the criteria is maybe met, but it's not enough for the county participation. So that would be my only reluctance. But one of the things that we did talk about with Stantec was, if we did move forward with the FON, could we, as like a first step, have that kind of educational presentation and to hear feedback? Because sometimes you do even hear at that stage in the process, it may be a member of the community that's saying, I know that there's tons more calls for service over here, and it maybe isn't, you get some intel, right, from the community at that point. So I would definitely want to do that, but the only thing I would be reluctant to do too much, just in case it doesn't end up panning out and we don't go in that direction, of actually creating and establishing the CRA.
Well, I'd rather save the $21,000 and have the community buy in on it and go for it that way and have backing on the community.
Is this something that we can handle? Do we have the bandwidth to do internally?
No, we don't. I mean, it could take some months and reassigning of responsibilities.
And do we know what the county, we're saying the county's a 50% participant, but are they really? I mean, they're gonna experience a lot of the same property value decreases that we have. So are they gonna do 50%, or are they gonna do more like 25 or 10?
They can't go less than 50, which is why we use the conservative 50. It can go up to 95%. In a lot of other places, you start with the county contribution at 95%, and that's what the county contributes, whether it's in a charter county or not. In Pinellas, when they made those changes 5 years ago, that's when they created this new criteria, and they said that, nope, instead, we're going to start at a 50% TIF contribution and work our way up. So at a 50%, you're what's considered economic development. You need some attention. And then you can cheer up to community renewal, or urban revitalization is that max threshold that you really need extra attention, and the county will contribute the 95. So it's partly to do with that, why I don't want to get too ahead of things, or don't want us to get too far ahead of even assuming a higher TIF contribution or any, because at that point, what the city could do too, and cities have done this, is say the county says, nope, we're not participating, we want to see this in our general fund, even though, again, it would be, for the purpose of our CRA, we want it to be a model CRA that's looking at shared goals and objectives with the county that are very aligned with the overall needs. Again, this isn't just St. Pete Beach residents, this is Pinellas County residents. So it's okay for them to put some of that money back into St. Pete Beach. But there have been instances where the county has not contributed, and the city has went ahead and still created that CRA just to allow the redevelopment authority and to do certain things that they can't otherwise do separate from the general fund, and to allow them that redevelopment ability. Largo is a good example. They've got one area that's a TIF district and one that is not at this time. So there's more restrictions on what they can do in the one that they're getting county TIF funding. The other thing I would say is, as far as, it is an investment for sure, and that's why when we talked about it at length, as far as, just given the sensitivities of funding right now across the board, and the county, obviously these policy changes came from somewhere, and we know that there's new commissioners and, and probably maybe even other CRAs that maybe are popping up, especially in the aftermath of the storms. So when we talked about, okay, what is this, what would the purpose of the FON serve? That's where it seems like it would, again, be beneficial regardless, because it was 20 so years ago when the last FON was conducted. Unfortunately, some of those same conditions exist. You can actually take that FON and modify it and update it probably quite a bit. We've talked to the team about that. But so we want to document that those conditions still exist, and then not only would it give us a tool whether we were applying for additional funding or looking at that alternatives, but there are other avenues. Like even say that, you know, we could still enter into some other type of, maybe it's a resiliency area that we do through an interlocal with the county, but again, just documenting it, whether, and making it an objective report versus we just need it, our infrastructure, it's just going to give us that tool moving forward. And one last thing, a lot of times you will see, for example, I think Forward Pinellas is maybe one of them, that as you're going through grant funding through them, you know, there'll be an opportunity to just say if the project is in a CRA or not. So at that point, you know, knowing that if it's in a CRA, then it's kind of been vetted already for that extra need, and so again can just potentially get us additional points depending on what we're looking to do.
And if it's everything in red on the map, correct?
All of the colors on the map. Sorry, that was just
All of the colors or not the colors in red?
all of the colors, including the red.
Okay.
Commissioner Maldonado?
No, thank you, Laura. You explained and did a great job with that. I like the flexibility and the framework. I like that it's a tool that we can use as a platform to launch from in the future, and that we are able to adjust it to suit the needs, individual needs of the various districts, and not just a carte blanche. So thank you for answering those questions very thoroughly. Thank you.
Just piggybacking on something Commissioner Robinson mentioned, if at some point, let's say we decided to have a Pass-A-Grille CRA, is that an option, as you mentioned, for St. Augustine, where they have one next to another and next to another? So we wouldn't necessarily have to do it at the same time if there was a finding that there's a need in Pass-A-Grille as well?
Absolutely. It's something that we could look at and explore further. Again, it starts with that finding of necessity and documenting the need, but I don't want to, just based on what's come, like there was legislation this year that was, looking to do away with CRAs, so they are a great economic development tool, but I think it's becoming more and more important what you're hearing, whether it's from the legislation or the county, that they want these areas to be very intentional and specific, and that the redevelopment, even if it's a five-page plan, but it's specifically saying that this is the infrastructure project that we're going to do with the funds. That's really the direction that I think CRAs are going moving forward. And so to look at an area or an additional area or two, absolutely, I think that we're going to have some, hopefully, not only lessons that we're going to learn throughout this process, but it's going to give us a really good opportunity to sit down with the county and identify those shared goals and objectives, and then show again at the end of the day how this is not a handout for them. This is an investment.
So just going back to what you just said about a handout, so part of the benefit to the city is, so in the previous budget meeting we looked at, when you pay your property tax bill, let's say it's, $10,000, 80% of that goes to the county and 20% comes back to the city. So in a CRA situation, the county takes some of their 80% portion and contributes it back to us, right? So this is tax revenue that would have gone to the county, but instead it comes back to the city, to that district, and has to be reinvested in that district for those infrastructure projects. Okay, so if we had, for example, a CRA in District 1, and we received money for that, we could use that for Pump Station 1.
Mm-hmm.
We could use that for the pipeline that goes out to Treasure Island.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
Base, I'd have to
these are
defer to Camden.
yeah,
I don't know how the waterway works.
I'm just saying that these are the types of projects, and so this would be tax revenue that the county would generally capture, but it's now diverted to the city, which is why it requires a buy-in and a vote from the county commission to approve it.
And it frees money to other areas
Yes,
of our city.
yes. Okay. So the other question I have is for the city manager, maybe, in general, with this particular one, I don't have an issue spending $21,000 to do the study to let us know whether we can whether we have anything we can move forward with to present to the public and say, here's why we would want to do this, because now we have data. Are there any grants available? So I know when we did the study down in Don Cesar for the boat ramp, there were grants available for that. Is there any way to offset this?
That's a better question for you, actually. I don't know that there would be.
No, at this stage, I think that the potential grant opportunities would open up more as we develop the redevelopment plan.
Okay.
Not at this stage.
Right. Okay.
However, sorry, let me say one more thing. But the type of technical assistance that we've already received through our partner Fiber, and also we also, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier, but we've also tapped into the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. They were able to use our GIS information and pull the taxable valuation for that area. So I think that there is an opportunity to, we're going to continue exploring that, and just, again, the goal is to be able to, when moving forward, to have a redevelopment plan that's got the Fiber logo on it, our logo on it, Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, to really show that this is a unified, concentrated effort to, you know, rebuild and build better.
Thank you. Any further
once you
questions for Laura? Thank you, Laura. Yes, sir?
Once you have a CRA and you have the TIF funding and you have the TIF finance in place, you can use that for matching funds to get grants from the DEP and other state agencies and federal agencies. So it can be used for matching funds. Also, I was going to mention, to one of your questions, can you have more than one district? You can have more than one district. Usually you just have one CRA board, and that board will sit for both districts.
Thank you.
And the board's made up typically of some members of the council, but also some resident landowners, property owners, business owners.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it should require community involvement and buy-in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the first step to determine whether we even have something that we could bring back to the community and say, here's what some of our options are. Okay. Any further comments, questions, discussions?
I just wanted to express my thanks to Laura. You clearly, this is something that you're a real expert in, and I think we're really fortunate to have somebody here who's an expert on this subject, because I think this could be tremendously valuable for us. So thank you.
Any problem continuing this to the next meeting to maybe seek input from the community?
I'm ready to make a motion, but
I mean, we always have everything noticed with plenty of advance time. I think everybody's had an opportunity. I have not received any emails on it. Again, I think the preliminary step is to find out whether we have something or not that we can work with. And then that will actually be a completely different process. We'll have workshops and presentations, and then we can, if there's something that there's found.
then I'll make a motion to authorize an agreement with Stantec for a community redevelopment area study and finding of necessity report in the amount of $21,720.
Second.
City Clerk, if you please do a roll call.
Commissioner Ruznicki,
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
No.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we move on to presentations. A presentation on the impact of SB 190 by Calvinger, Don and Associates.
Good evening again, Laura Canary, Community Development Director. Tonight we have with us Jim Hickey from CGA, who, as you know, it was scheduled to come back once we put the comp plan update on hold, and so he's here to provide an update, and I'll be happy to answer any questions with him after the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Welcome back.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I will try to be brief because I think a lot of what I'm going to say we talked about back in May, but just wanted to give you an update as you requested. Just moving forward, so, and this is just an update, and we've talked about this before. We've had 2 public meetings. There's a memorandum in your backup. We wanted to give you some analysis to show what we've done to date. And we haven't completed any additional work. We wanted to wait until we had this discussion to see whether or not you wanted to move forward or how you wanted to move forward with the process. So, as we stated, this was done, and between May 13th and July 1st, the governor actually signed the bill into law. So I do know that Susan Devarthan, their Weiss Serota, is working with other communities to file a lawsuit. As we know, lawsuits don't happen in quick timing, but I think there's some discussion among municipalities moving forward to try to do something to stop it from every single community in the state, which is what it's doing now. Became law, and I think what we're here to talk to you tonight about is, restrictive and burdensome. I think what we talked about initially with the large resort district is trying to help restrict, maybe help kind of lower the height and things like that. That would be something that we can't do right now, and really to go forward and to draft legislation that may not happen until 2027 may not be the right course of action to move forward right now. And this is just looking at, as I just wanted to mention, we did have a contract to do both, the large resort and districts TC1 and TC2. So of course, there's a couple of different options. I think what we're looking at or recommending for today is to look at us moving forward with just the town center and focus on that. Looking at what types of uses could be allowed, look at maybe expanding those through public engagement, seeing to get some more flexibility. These areas, because they're smaller parcels and you've got a lot of different uses, take a little bit more time to do redevelopment. Where you have the large districts, it's one parcel, it's a huge number of acres. These take a little more finessing. And trying to come up with some implementation strategies for you moving forward. I think the public engagement really should be targeted in this area. I think I talked about it in the May meeting. I found it really helpful to have that public engagement with the business owners and as well as the property owners in the area, having a separate public engagement with the public and then kind of bringing everyone together. So we really get both sides. Sometimes the owners don't want to say something in front of the residents and vice versa, right? So to get a full understanding of what each want to see in the area and then move forward with that. And I think with the discussion today, you're talking about, he's talking about potentially a new CRA. We could dovetail some of the proposed regulations and changes that we want, at least into your town center district. And of course, you have the option, one of the options is to not move forward at all, and we will provide you with whatever information we have and entertain maybe something in the future. So with that, that's all I have for this evening. I'm here to answer questions. And again, thank you very much for the time this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Questions, comments?
Happy to hear about a lawsuit on 180, that lawsuit driven, but at least somebody's making a stand against it.
And we can provide, it actually just came in today, we can provide there's a draft of a potential resolution that they may want communities to sign on to, so.
Interesting, okay. But I would be interested in seeing that.
I'll be talking with that firm on Thursday.
Okay, great.
Would you be able to provide us a summary or an update after that conversation?
Send it around, yep.
Okay. Yeah, the challenge with SB 180 has been, as with many things in the last few years, that there seems to be an erosion of home rule. Especially in light of the 2 events that we had last year, that the city would be prohibited from taking any steps to make the city more resilient. I just don't see how that math computed in the decision making. Now, this is nothing new, right? Because this bill has come before us every event for the last at least 5 years I remember.
Correct. Right.
Yeah, so this isn't anything new or unexpected. It's just, is there an option C where we put your work on hold for an indefinite amount of time, maybe 6 months to a year, to see if something shakes out with the lawsuit or any changes to SB, or whether something comes back on the CRA, and then we have something more concrete we can work on.
Of course, you're the policymakers, so, you know, I do think we could provide some analysis and some information for you for the town center. I really think the town center is more about incentivizing additional development and not restricting. But your comment about resiliency, I think that's something that the cities are, you know, it's every city in the entire state. And, you know, every coastal community has the same issues, right? So putting the restrictions on that is very difficult. I mean, I think our help with you would be looking at land use, looking at the comp plan, looking at the zoning regulations, and see if we could provide some incentive to help enhance this area. So, but your decision moving forward.
Commissioner Resnicki?
And just a question for, and maybe this is between District 1 and 2, because you're more familiar with the town center, but in light of everything that has happened with the hurricanes and what it looks like right now, I mean, does this help as an opportunity for the community to be able to discuss what we would like it to look like, or what could help that area? Because there might be a lot of restrictions that I'm not aware of, you know, land development codes or whatever it may be, that's not allowing them to move forward. You know, so are we missing, could we potentially be missing a time where we can get, like he said, you want to target the people or the owners, right, the people who own those properties, and working with them first, and then the rest of the city. I mean, it kind of sounded like a nice idea or plan to being able to talk with that community about what we want it to look like, or what we need help with.
So I think that the specifically Town Center 1 and Town Center 2, I think is definitely in a spot where a review of the comp plan or potentially some, maybe not necessarily even a review of the comp plan. I think there are potentially some zoning idiosyncrasies that have come up since the hurricane, right? And I think those are things that need to be addressed. And I think for some of them, it's an opportunity to address some issues where there are some vacant buildings. And then there are some others where it's not that we would lose an opportunity to address them now because it's vacant, but it's spots where the storm has highlighted areas that maybe, maybe the original zoning wouldn't be accomplishing what was intended or what we intend. You know, as one example, on the south side of 76th Avenue, all the way west, the last block of 76th Avenue to the west. It's the only place in the city, I think, where there is residential, where it's zoned residential on one side of the street and commercial on the other side of the street. And the side of the street that's zoned commercial has no commercial. It only has multifamily and one single family. But all of those people after the storm were like, oh my gosh, if I had been more damaged and wasn't able to fix my property that I have, I wouldn't be able to build back what I have. I would have no option except to build mixed use or commercial. And the people across the street are going, I don't really want to sit on my front porch and have coffee looking at a dentist's office when I've been looking at a house. And so, I think there are places like that the storms have highlighted a need to fix some what I would call a zoning error. And there may be other areas where we have some opportunities where, we could get some better redevelopment than what we're getting, where people wanted to do something different after the storm, but the zoning doesn't let them. Now, I don't know that any of that requires a wholesale comp plan review. I think, these are probably small areas that can be handled, one at a time by staff, fixing some little problems that have come up. So I don't know if that's helpful to you at all, but.
So there wouldn't need to be a change in the comp plan, you think? I mean, it's like, if you're changing the use, the zone.
I mean, it's a change to the land development code. I don't know that it's a change to the comp plan.
Commissioner Maldonado?
Thank you. So I think we've taken this project as far as we can. Nothing's been done since May. We've received potential input for changes to city codes. And I do think that if we needed to at some point, we can come back and relook at it. But there's plenty here, I think, to just go over and digest. But my question to the city manager is this something that we can do internally? I asked this previously on the other issue, and looks like the heavy lifting's been done, so.
If we're looking at the town center and the land development code, we do have expertise in-house on zoning and these particular idiosyncrasies you're talking about. We've talked about them before. So those could be handled in a more narrow approach and make those recommendations, not even recommendations, bring you options to consider, and then provide staff any direction you'd like to make to that code.
Thank you.
Okay. So it seems, if I'm reading correctly, the consensus is to put this project on hold.
I think so.
Prepared to make a motion?
Doesn't require a vote. It's,
Okay, then we're good, yeah, thank
yeah.
you.
Jim, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you for
Thank you.
everything.
Okay. Hopefully, we can get you back, after a 180.
Well, I will send you, I'll send your attorney the information. I think the more cities that join this, I think the better off
Yeah.
we're all going to be, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next on presentations, we have a proposed amendment to the noise ordinance.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Brandon Berry, planner with the city. So this is a follow-up from the community meeting we had a few months ago discussing the noise ordinance in part. Up to this point, the city has explored two options for revising its noise ordinance. The second was presented to the commission at prior discussions. The first was simply lowering the decibel standards. As the commission knows, we have a 65 decibel receiving limit during the day. At night, it drops down to 55 decibels receiving. Some of the challenges with lowering that standard is that, we obviously have existing uses that a lower standard may not be compliant with, or rather the uses would become non-compliant with a lower standard. They may have been established years, decades previously, and they've continued to operate. So it's really addressing those existing uses with a lower absolute standard. We also have many areas of the city that already have a high ambient, which I'll use intermittently with background decibel levels. So if the background receiving decibel level at a location at 8 p.m., for example, is 60 decibels, setting a standard lower than that is ineffective. We can't measure that. There's really no way to identify a sound source if they're in violation of what is in below a background rating. What was brought to you earlier this year was a plainly audible standard. This is a standard that other communities in the state have adopted. This is what it sounds like. If it can be heard, it's a violation. The challenge that we faced was defining the distance that was appropriate, any kind of exemptions, if there were to be any exemptions at all, and the time frames for the plainly audible standard. Staff's only request is that the city does not have a sound engineer on staff. I'm certainly not one. Our code enforcement staff have training, but they're not engineers. And we just ask that a clearly enforceable ordinance that uses commonly acceptable technology, like we have our decibel raters, and then techniques, which is the training that we've received through the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office for the use of that technology. So the issue that staff understands it, looking for confirmation from the commission on this and direction tonight, is that we frequently receive noise complaints based on a relative, which is a receiving, rather than an absolute, which is a total decibel concern. Generally speaking, a 60 decibel sound source in a commercial area at 5 o'clock on a Friday is going to be heard. It's going to be a different magnitude relative to a quiet residential area on a Tuesday night at 10 p.m. So it's not necessarily about whether the sound source is in compliance with that absolute standard, the 65, the 55 that we have in the books currently, but what is the actual magnitude? What is the effect on the receiving property? That's what we understand the issue to be, both based on the community meeting earlier this year, as well as some of the complaints that we've received. We often receive complaints where the sound source may not be violating the noise ordinance as it's currently adopted, but the resident typically, it is loud relative to the background noise at their property. And as I mentioned before, the background decibel level may already be at the 65 or the 55 dBA limit, depending on the time of the day. So if there is a lower absolute standard that's set, it's unenforceable with our current equipment. So some cities, I'll give an example in just a moment, set a relative in addition to an absolute decibel standard that prohibits a single sound source from exceeding a specified decibel level difference compared with the background ambient level. It can help preserve the peace during reasonable hours as specified. So Naples is an example. They have an adopted standard. They do have those absolute standards, the 65, the 55 that we have during the various hours of the day. But they also state that in no case will the noise level on the premise of any occupied property exceed the ambient noise level by more than 5 decibels. So that's controlling that single source being significantly louder than a background reading.
Brandon, so in that case, that would require a reading at that property at a different date when, let's say, the music from the neighbor wasn't playing?
Well, the way that, and we'll have to work through this in the ordinance, but the way that the Code Enforcement Department typically operates is they ask for the source to be stopped for some period of time so they can get that background rating, and we would codify that as a basis for taking that reading.
So in this case, they would go out to somebody calls in, it's 11 o'clock at night, Code Enforcement goes out, they take a reading, they go to the source, they ask them to stop, they come back, they take a second reading, and if there's more than a 5 decibel difference, that would constitute a violation in this instance.
That's correct.
Okay.
So that's the direction that's the item that we're seeking direction on.
Sometimes also the bands, when they're playing, they'll break between songs to adjust their music or instruments. So you'll have a song, a break, a song, and then maybe a set, and then a longer break. So typically, if it's a music thing, there will be some periods when it's just the ambient. It's not always. I mean, in a disco or I guess one for a better word, a rave, something like that, where the music just keeps going continuously, then you may not have a break.
Yeah, all those raves we have.
At Coachella.
No, I'm thinking more in terms of, again, the live music live music has never really been the issue. It's always been the issue. It's past 10 p.m., right? And almost all of those instances that we've had, primarily it's been, past 10 p.m. with a few exceptions that, we've had issues that are during the day. Somebody's just excessive, but usually it's later at night, and it's ambient music from or amplified music from whatever establishment.
Wouldn't you take the reading first without them turning it off? Just because
they would
take it first and then go and ask them to take it off and then do it. Okay.
Yeah, first they would go out to the resident's home. They would take a reading.
Okay, just
then
make
they
sure
would
it's
turn off the source
afterwards. Yeah.
and then go back to the property, take a second reading.
Just want to make sure I got the.
Brandon, is the 5 decibel difference, does it have anything to do with the absolute decibel standard? In other words, if the ambient noise was incredibly quiet, it was 10 decibels, and the noise coming from the source is 15 decibels, or is the person making that noise then in violation?
Yes, it would be an absolute difference. We tend to see, even during quiet hours, the ambient is usually around 45 to 50, so it would typically be and that's receiving at the complainant's property. That's not necessarily
at the source.
At the source, it's at the receiving.
Okay.
Yes.
The other thing is 5 decibels isn't, so if you're going from 50 to 55, you're not going up 10%. You're going up, so every 3 decibels is double the sound volume.
Yeah.
So at 5, you're almost, so going from 50 to 55 is almost 3 times as loud as it is at 50 baseline. So it's not, it may look like a small increment, but it's actually exponential.
And with most of our complaints being received in what we would consider to be the wind down hours, so 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., that aligns with our current noise ordinance from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. It adds 3 hours in the front for those potential wind down hours. That's when this would be enforced. It would not be during the day unless we receive guidance from the commission otherwise. It exempts those approved uses that are subject to the conditional use permit criteria. Those are often significantly stricter than this ordinance would limit them to. For example, we recently approved a conditional use permit where the noise source could not even be heard from the abutting property, so that would obviously be much stricter than this. It would exempt things like commission-approved special events, any kind of emergency repair work, things like that that are currently in the ordinance. They would remain exempt. This isn't directly related. This is an additional request from staff, but as we bring more conditional use permits to the commission, it's clear that there are certain conditions that are always going to be expected. We feel that we should just standardize those because we want applicants, when they come in, to know that these are going to be a requirement from the commission. Obviously, the governor is one of them. It's something that we can maybe hash out a little bit better through code so we can make it clear this isn't an extensive or an expensive investment. It can really just be putting the volume controls in a lockbox that only management can access. So it gives us our ability to set those expectations before they come forward. It would make any of those conditions standard for any outdoor music conditional use permit, so the commission could focus more on the context-specific conditions that would apply to that use. This is not a replacement to the conditional use permit process. They would still come forward. We want to be changing that use in any way. We'd just be standardizing those technical requirements.
There are also, there's certain events that don't require CUP. So for example, if they're having a block party, right? Or if we're doing the summer concert series in Horan Park. So would there be exemptions for that? Because I could see a situation where the neighbor across, Boca Ciega, it's going to be more than 5 decibels and they start at 7, right? And so would there be a special, so as part of the issuing permit for that event, it would also have an exemption to this particular item?
Yes, we've written those into recent conditional use permits. That's something we can look at the code criteria, that it exempts special events that are specifically approved for that property.
I'm saying that some of these would not be a CUP, right? So let's say if Corey Avenue Business Association decides they want to have a block party, they get a permit for street closure and live music until 10 p.m.
Right.
Will that permit then include an exemption for particularly just this part, the 5?
Yes, it would. Any special event approved by the commission, or we could add in, any kind of administratively approved. That limitation is more for just general private operating sound sources. So with that, we are looking for your guidance tonight. We have not completed a draft of any language, but this is something just conceptually is what we believe might address the issue as we understand it. We're looking for the commission's guidance. If this is something you're accepting of, we'll bring back a revised ordinance in the near future. Thank you.
So one of the questions that came up the last time this was brought before the commission was that it might be difficult to enforce. Will this give you the tools necessary? Will this give code enforcement and the sheriff's office something concrete that they can go back out with and say, here are numbers, this is what it was, this is what it is, yes or no?
It will. This isn't inconsistent with how we already do the readings, which is we take the source present and then the background reading, we write them down, we compare them. That's how they fill out their forms, and they use that as justification. I think some of the initial concern with the plainly audible is, getting up and presenting that, well, we heard it, we need some kind of evidence that it was actually a violation, and this it doesn't add any additional work onto staff. It's something we already track when we do these readings.
So it doesn't really change the way that code enforcement will operate. It would simply give them one additional resource and tool in their bag.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner?
How many dB readers do we have?
I believe we have 2.
Do we need to get more?
I can speak with our code enforcement manager. I don't think the complaints are frequent enough that we would need more than that. We have one, I believe, that we share with the sheriff's office, and then we have one that is for staff, so.
And who calibrates those?
We calibrate. Part of the training process is how to calibrate them for
Who provided the training?
the sheriff's office.
Okay. Because I asked that question because I was on the receiving end of a phone call where the sheriff said he hadn't received training on the raters. So, and then I guess city manager, are we going to have code enforcement after hours or weekends, or are we just relying on the sheriff's office?
I think it's going to be a mix of both. I've talked to the captain, who's our representative, and he's assured me that all sheriff deputies that serve the city are trained or should be trained and able to respond after hours. So we're working on accountability with the sheriff's office, as well as looking at code enforcement right now on whether we change scheduling, especially when we're doing targeted enforcement. If we've had several complaints, that rises to the level where we may change schedules to actually address those areas and events because we have knowledge that we've been having a problem. So we're just going to change the deployment on that as well, possibly.
And there also seemed to be some sort of issue with the sheriff's department getting info to our code enforcement for whatever needed to be done on that. I don't know what the process happens after you get a violation. I don't know what happens after that. Maybe somebody can tell me.
The way I understand it right now is, I'm thinking in particular of a recent case where the sheriff's deputy was, because they're typically on site at City Hall daily, and they did communicate directly to the code enforcement officer about the case, so they're communicating back and forth. That's typically how they would interact.
So it's a written, or is it just a verbal, or do you know?
I don't know that level of detail.
And then after that, it goes to a fine, to special magistrate, to whatever? It goes to their CUP review?
I believe, and maybe our manager over code enforcement would know this better than me on what the exact process is for a citation for a noise. He's shaking his head no. So, okay, we'll get you an answer.
Okay. And then if it does go to a situation like that, what happens with the CUP process? If they're in violation, how does that get notified? Does that get notified to planning? Does it get, who does it get notified?
So in order for a CUP to be reconsidered by the commission, we would have had taken the case all the way to special magistrate with
Twice, right? Is it 2 times? I think it's 2 strikes, or is it 1?
I don't think it's twice. If we have, I mean, by the time we get to special magistrate, we're seeking compliance. If we can't get compliance, we could bring it up to the commission to consider whether or not that CUP would be retracted.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have consensus whether we want the staff to move forward with this or not?
I think it sounds pretty reasonable. I mean, clearly we'll get feedback as we go forward from the community. The 7 o'clock at night seems like it might be a touch early, but like I say, I'm sure we'll get feedback as it goes forward. It seems like a pretty reasonable method.
I look at it as that if it doesn't work, we can add more to it, right? It's like anything that we do up here, we can add more to it. We can take a step away from it. It's an absolute only from the time that we say it's an absolute till the time we say it's not. And I think it needs to have some sort of teeth to it, so I'm okay with it going forward as is.
Okay, sounds like we have consensus. City manager?
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have general audience comments. City clerk, do we have any?
Yes, Vincent Torminia.
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Vincent Torminia, 3514 Casablanca Avenue, St. Pete Beach, Florida. I'm here for a couple of reasons tonight. The first one is I want to thank you, Francis, and Commission for keeping us dry on Casablanca Avenue. That's my first thing. I had said it on the news, but they cut it off. So I wanted to come here in person, and I want to thank you for doing everything possible to help us. So that's one. The second thing is I want to know about the state case against the former commission. If the state attorney was supposed to the last time said he'll try and find out what's going on with it, state investigation.
I called last week, and once again, they're not able to provide comment at this time.
Okay. And the last thing is that in 2 weeks we'll have a post office again. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinny.
Kathy Garchow?
If you please state your name and address for the record.
Kathy Garsha, 3607 Casablanca Avenue. And so I wanted to speak on the financial workshop discussion. Again, it is frustrating we can't comment, and I know a decision had to be made in the previous meeting. I don't know how many people are paying attention to what's happening in our community. So I'm not suggesting I'm anywhere close to having any expertise, but I'll spend definitely hours in pouring through this, and then I come in here and ask some other dumb questions. So I'm gonna assume you all have a much deeper set of insight than me based on the decisions you have to make. But as far as I'm concerned, what I'm hearing is we need a $16 million emergency bridge loan because of the circumstance that we are running at that level in this city, and we're in the middle of hurricane season again. We are bare bones on our funds from a general fund standpoint with just 2 to 3 months available in terms of just having some cushion, which, by the way, we're using the general fund, 27% of it, to help offset and subsidize our enterprise funds that don't have enough to address. And I'm the last person to want to say, yeah, raise my taxes. But when I looked at a $300 increase for a year, when I'm thinking, well, right now, we're all pouring money into our homes. And I know you all think you're being kind by saying, well, we want to give you a break. But the truth is, I want my infrastructure fixed. I want the city to look great again. I don't want to just see you guys out there repairing and trying to recover. I want us building, things that are going to be for the next 50, 60 years. So when you think about helping us be penny wise, let's please look at the big picture and help all the community and all the citizens understand that $300 more a year equated to something substantial rather than us kind of limping along with, I think, what we all feel like is a break-fix kind of city right now. So I guess that's all I have to say. You've made your decision, but I think we've got a long road ahead of us. And my favorite thing, which I'm gonna just lay here unless I can't show it, but we have $0 in our resiliency fund, yet it is our topic that we cover. It's not showing up. Okay, we have about 70 million in today's dollars in resiliency projects, and there's no money. So I think y'all need to consider answering to us as citizens, how do we fund that? Thank you.
Thank you. And just so that we can catch everybody up, so that for people that did not watch the budget meeting earlier, so I want to just say two things, Kathy, to what you mentioned. One, the bridge loan, and we probably should have done a better job explaining the bridge loan. So when we spend all of that money on emergency services, trash pickup, clean out, all of the things that we did right there, so we had reserve funds and emergency fund, which is why it's at 0, and that was all drawn down, right? And now it can take, city manager, please correct me, anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 years from FEMA to finish the reimbursement process.
Could be 5 to 7, actually.
Okay. So we've drawn down those funds, and so one of the reasons we looked at the bridge loan is because it is a zero interest, we're not making any payments, is to have that there in case there is another event in the next 10 years while we wait for FEMA to reimburse us. So the reason why our reserves are so low is because of that, and then this is here for an emergency situation should we need those funds again. Now we have them available. The second component of that is, and I can't speak for the other commissioners, so I'll simply reiterate my point that I made during the budget meeting, is that we can increase revenue to the city by increasing taxes, or we can look at somewhere else. And we are looking somewhere else, because we do need those additional funds. And so one of the things that the city manager has done for the last 3 or 4 months is looking at a fee study to make sure that the impact fees, the permitting fees, the rent fees, all those things that we charge are actually what we need to be charging. And the second part that I point out, for example, is parking. We could just as easily raise the rate to residents by a couple of points and get $1.5 million in, or we can raise parking by $1 and have the exact same effect without impacting our residents. So rather than charging our residents for the money that we need, we'll pass it on. Pass the grill, you can go down there any weekend. Everyone's circling. Why? Because there's too many cars and not enough parking. And so we could potentially raise that, and we're going to continue raising it, and the fee study and the parking study will tell us how far can we push it. But it's not that the commission is saying we don't need more money. Sure. But do we charge it to our residents, or do we charge it to our visitors? And if we have the option of charging to the visitors and not raising on taxes on people who are already doing plenty of things to their homes, who've already got plenty of other expenses right now that they weren't planning on, my vote is going to be, let's charge the visitors. Let's charge more for parking.
You can't make 70 million up.
We're not.
You got resiliency projects that are much bigger. That's my point. I'm not arguing
Yeah.
you can incrementally get $1 million from parking and improve our rate studies. Absolutely. Amen. Do it.
Yep.
But the resiliency projects are substantial, and it's a big mountain.
The resiliency projects are 3 times what you mentioned. They're not 70 million, they're about 200 million. And so, that's not something we're going to fix today. All I can tell you is that there are things we're working on that hopefully in the next couple months we can bring to the commission and say, here are some ideas of how we get $200 million. Because it has to happen, one way or the other. It's not a matter of whether it gets done or not, it's just a matter of how and when. And the decision that was made today at the budget workshop was not to increase taxes on our residents, but rather look at alternatives for generating that revenue to bring that in, because we need the money. Not having it is not an option. It's just, where do we get it from? And it was just that the commission decided that was not the pot that we wanted to tap at this point. We have other resources and options, and we should exhaust those first before we raise taxes. But your comments are 100% valid. Thank you.
Deb Scheckner.
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Deborah Scheckner, Pocasega Isle Drive in St. Pete Beach. First, there's something simple. I've been in touch with Publix, but they haven't gotten back to me yet about rebuilding, what they're going to do. And I'm not sure what's happening at the cash and carry, so if you have that information, I'd like to have it. So regarding the June 24th, 2025 commission meeting, during the discussion of appointing an interim District 4 commissioner, Commissioners Marriott and Rosnicki had already decided that Mr. Shuros was their choice for District 4 interim commissioner. Interesting, both commissioners stated that they had many phone calls were received, as well as many emails, convincing them that Mr. Shuros was the best choice among the candidates. Their reasoning was that they were listening to residents. That rang very false to me, and I'm going to tell you why. Because when each commissioner received hundreds of emails asking them to vote no on Tradewinds and Serrata Resort, as well as hundreds of residents showing up at meetings, so many that overflow areas were added. Residents' comments in both cases did not sway Commissioner Marriott. She chose to vote yes on both those projects. Commissioner Ruznicki voted for one of the projects. Clearly, an overwhelming majority of residents who asked you to vote no on these projects voiced their opinion, presented facts and information. Unfortunately, they were completely marginalized and ignored. Enter the June 24th meeting, and suddenly both commissioners stated they were listening to the resident as all of those phone calls came and those emails that you both said you received. So many that you compelled yourself to vote for Mr. Shiros. Residents also showed up at that June 24th meeting, were not heard by either of you as your collective minds were made up. But those phone calls and those emails commanded an influence you could not resist. My question is, how many phone calls and how many emails did you receive? And I do plan to follow up with a public records request. So don't tell me those residents really matter, but they only mattered this time. They didn't matter when the city was experiencing the large resort, and you know that the crowds were here. You know you received so many emails, but it didn't count then, but it counted this time. So where is it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, City Clerk. Next, we have the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I was pulling item D.
Everything, we're only voting on A, B, and
So amended.
C.
Okay.
D was pulled.
Thank you.
Do I pull it now, though? I wanted to talk about C. That's what I thought I understood.
We did not pull it, but there's nothing to say we cannot pull it. So
So I want to make sure.
we're gonna isolate 4C and D, and the consent will just cover 4A and B.
I'll make a motion to approve consent items A and B.
I'll second.
City Clerk, if you please do a roll call.
Commissioner Maldonado,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki,
Yes.
and Mayor Petrilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next we have item 4C, authorize a work order with Roland Inc.
So I had asked a couple of questions. I think the city manager shared some of the responses to all of us, but I still had a couple more, and maybe Camden, you could help with this. But we've been talking a lot about saving money here, and looking at our budgets and everything, and this is an $84,000 ask for a temporary barrier, and this is where I get stuck. And I saw the drawings that you sent. It didn't show me where. I read the address and the intersection, and I walked over there and I went by and that's why I asked, about failure and what we looked at, because in that side of Gulf Way, that wall has the space. It's the wall. It had the sidewalk and then the dune, right? So when you look at the the north end from Paradise Grill, on that side, and if any of you have walked there and seen it, the wall is abutting the sand, right? So to me, just by observation, not being an expert, and I looked at what the report was, it's because of all that pressure, water, and sand cutting across could have impacted that wall greater than on the north side, because the north side already had the sand behind it, right? And then if I remember too, we had some impact because of the moving of the sand, and this part I don't think was answered, but I don't remember if it was one of the questions, but when they were cleaning out the sand on Gulf Way, They being, and I say they because I'm not sure which company was doing it, and then I know we had people out there who were doing the cleaning of the sand, so they're kind of sorting the sand, piling it up in, heaping piles. It was like a hill of sand out there. That some damage occurred during that time as well. So besides the storm, maybe there was a possibility of two hits because of the cleaning efforts. But if this is something, I think from my understanding, that's coming in 2026 for a permanent fix, what is the concern of having to do this right now, to have a temporary, like, is there a safety issue? At first I thought, oh, it's to hold the sand, but without knowing where this wall is going, is it going to hold back the sand that's already been piled, or is it being placed in the same location? Because if it were in the same location, any wind or sand or storm is going to do the same thing. It's just going to topple it over like a domino, right, and just fall out. So I know I hit you with a couple of questions, but that was my thought. And if we're going to be spending the money in 2026, why put an $84,000 investment now and just go ahead and do it permanent?
Thank you for those questions. For the record, Camden Mills, Public Services Director. So to your first point about the location, we would propose to put it on the west side of that sidewalk, closer to the sand, similar to like what you see on north of 9th Avenue. And we would propose the permanent wall replacement be that as well, that we would place it as close to the dune as possible rather than on the eastern side of the sidewalk like it was previously. Due to the question about additional damages post-storm from contractor, I can't speak to that damage was done during the sand placement, but I will say there was some areas of the wall that had like exposed rebar that we saw, and we did demo that section of the wall as well, just because it posed a safety threat. So there was some additional wall removal beyond what was just completed because of the storm damage. The timing and the need for why this temporary wall instead of just waiting for the permanent wall. Really, I'll leave that decision up to you guys to decide on. We have received a lot of community feedback of just wanting something in place there. I do believe that, a temporary barrier wall would serve better than no wall at all. But I do definitely think that the permanent solution is what would be the fix against a major storm surge event. The timing of that project, as you know, right now is planned for fiscal year 26. So what we would do is solicit a request for a proposal for engineering and contractor, design build team. And then once that selection process goes through, which takes several months, then we'd bring it to commission to get that contract approved. We'd start the work, and the engineering design phase would start before the construction, obviously. So there will be quite a big time gap until that permanent wall does actually get installed. So this would just be a temporary basis to carry us through storm season.
Was the concern aesthetic? Like, what was the community concerned about? Because it's not going to look, obviously, like what it looked before. And if you look at those pictures, we were talking about F-dot barriers. It's basically the walls you see when you're going through the highway, right? Those concrete.
Correct, yep. It would be like those Jersey barriers. I think protection from sand was one concern, wind-blown sand, and also if we were to have another storm surge event. I think another concern was just people over the dunes. Walking through the dunes, some of that orange fencing, I know, people can cut through it and go through. I think this would provide more of a permanent type barrier for those people that would be trying to trespass onto the dunes. So those are some of the major type of concerns that I've heard from the community.
So if it were in 2026, would it be, would the proposals be coming like June, July for that next fiscal? Is that what you meant?
I would hope we would get the request for proposal out in the first quarter of fiscal year 26. So that's something that request for proposal document has been drafted. So I'm hoping we can get that onto the streets soon so we can start implementing this project as close to October 1st as we can.
Thank you.
Is any of this eligible for FEMA or any other?
That's a great question. This temporary wall would not be eligible for FEMA expense. The permanent wall replacement is a FEMA project that we're working through.
Okay. And then they're Jersey barriers that you're using, correct? And they're just rebarbed in, it looks like, from the diagram? Okay, yes. I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
I would just add that overwhelmingly, especially last night, that the community over in District 4 really wants this to happen. You know, the biggest concern is that we're still 90 days into hurricane season, and that if something were to happen, this is a mitigation measure. The other thing is, hopefully you can just comment for a second on the improvement even of these barriers with the tows and how that's going to work to help secure that better than what we had there previously. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so the permanent wall that we're proposing would have a foundation to it with a toe, and the purpose of that is to prevent some overturning movement of that wall. I think what we saw from the sand movement and the storm surge, that water was able to get underneath the existing wall and underneath the existing sidewalk, which contributed to some of the roadway damage that was sustained. So a wall that has more of a deep footer foundation would help prevent those overturning forces and help prevent further upland damage in a future event.
Do you have a guesstimate on what the permanent wall's going to run?
So the permanent wall, just based on like an FDOT unit price for that type, is about $225,000 total. But that's just for the wall material itself. Of course, you know, you'd have mobilization cost, overhead and profit added on top of that. In total, we're estimating about like $3 million for that project.
And that's going to potentially FEMA reimbursed?
FEMA for the wall section of it. The roadway pavement portion is not FEMA reimbursable.
And does the $3 million cover the road as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I make the motion to approve.
I second.
City Clerk, if you please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosnicki,
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado,
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next, we have item 4D, purchase of workstations.
I just had a few questions on that. I know probably everybody saw my questions, which were how many staff. I understand we have 7 limited personnel that are looking to be in this 13 unit of workstations. I'm just wondering if there any other, since they're limited personnel, the other staff positions haven't even been staffed. Is there any other usage of space that we have? The conference room, either one. I know the upstairs one doesn't look like it gets used too much. Can we put technical review up there and move everybody else into the, other conference room? I'm just trying to think of ways to save money, and I'm looking at everything. So anybody staff-wise, don't get too offended because I'm looking at everything. So
I don't think it's a matter of having the physical space, the rooms. This speaks more to what we put in those rooms so that they're not sitting at a coffee table or a dining table with
Or,
their laptops, but rather so that they have legitimate workstations that at least create some separation and some, it's not going to be private because it's cubicles, but at least have.
there's not a lot of talking on the phone. It's not a sales force.
Yeah.
So
Did you want to expand on?
Well, just, I will say, our conference rooms are so overloaded that I've created technology in my office now to create another conference room space so that I can meet with groups of 6 or less. And, I mean, I would not ask a staff member to sit at a conference table for 8 hours a day. It's not, I'll speak to ergonomics. I have a lot of experience in that space, and it's just not a comfortable work environment to ask someone to sit like that all day. We could start to reduce cubicle size, possibly. I mean, there's probably some re-engineering, but you're talking about de minimis savings if I tried to take 1 or 2 cubicles away. So I support the project to put it forward, so I'll limit my comments to that.
Thank you.
I believe that you made efforts to look at other options, piecemealing it and looking at cheaper, lower cost things. But I think that the ergonomics piece plays a critical role, as does just the health, welfare, and morale of your staff. We want to make sure that they're adequately prepared and equipped to do their job to the full set of capabilities, and that they're not, forced to do it with inconveniences. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of workstations with the CI Group in the amount of $28,547 and 14 cents.
Second?
City Clerk?
Commissioner Robinson?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosnicki?
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have ordinances. 6A, final reading of ordinance 2025-10, amendments to the Land Development Code, Division 26, sign ordinance.
If I can read the header, this is the second and final reading of ordinance 2025-10, an ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, for the purpose of adopting amendments to the Land Development Code, Division 26, Sections 26.1 through 26.42, entitled Sign Ordinance, to ensure content-neutral sign definitions, standards, regulations, and requirements, and adopting amendments to the requirements for permitting, enforcement, and maintenance for new, existing, and non-conforming signs in all zoning districts, providing for codification, conflicts, severability, correction of scrivener's errors, construction, publication, and effective date. And Brandon will walk you through the changes we made since the second reading.
Thank you.
So we received two comments at the last meeting to make amendments. Both of them were great feedback. The first is on page 162 of the packet, page 8 of the ordinance pertaining to vehicle signs. The current definition, which was brought forward, was a little unclear. The first sentence kind of preceded the second in ways that it shouldn't have. So we modified that based on that to make it more clear that any vehicle parked in a way that's adverse to a commercial vehicle standard would be considered a vehicle sign, assuming it has a sign on it. There was some feedback from the commission regarding allowances for residential vehicles, especially personal vehicles that are wrapped, to not be subject to the 72-hour removal requirement. That was drafted to apply to those in commercial or mixed use. I'm sorry to do this at the podium, but I do ask, instead of what was drafted by staff as commercial or mixed use, just be changed to non-residential. It was clear that the request from the City Commission was to allow those exceptions for residential properties, so if we could just make that change, if this is something the Commission would like us to move forward with. And like I said, it's for any commercial vehicle that's currently prohibited from overnight parking on a residential property, those that are longer than 20 feet, more than 10 feet tall. That standard is not changing. That's in our parking division. This applies only to those personal vehicles that are wrapped with commercial signage. And then moving on to page 183, which is page 29 out of 42 of the ordinance. That's where we're talking about transitional and emergency signage. We already have those standards in for state of emergency. Those are unchanged. There was direction from the commission at the last meeting to look at those more parcel-specific catastrophic events. That's something we already define in our code. When there's a fire, when there's something that affects one specific property that maybe is not citywide, that requires that citywide declaration. This would allow for an additional banner during the time that it takes to restore the property, one additional freestanding sandwich board sign, or another sign type that would be deemed appropriate by the city manager. We didn't want to write something so prescriptive that it couldn't address those business-specific needs, but that would be specifically in the case of a catastrophic event, and it would last for the duration of that event. Those are the two changes we made. I'm happy to receive any more feedback. If not, we would request your motion to adopt this ordinance 2025-10.
Questions, comments?
I have two things. One is on the election signs on page 173. I was just curious because in the candidate's book, it's 45 days. Here we now have it 30 days. And prior we had 0 in here. So we've gone 0, 45, 30.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whose intent was that from 0 to 30?
Page of
and
the
then
ordinance.
45.
Where are you on?
173.
No,
Under
the
temporary-
ordinance page number.
Page 19.
40.
19.
Okay, thank you.
19, temporary signs.
So 45 is the current adopted standard. We're happy to change it back to 45.
Because I'm just pointing out that it's changed dramatically, and I believe the candidate book still says 45, but 8 months ago, or 6 months ago, that got nixed to nothing because it wasn't in our code as anything. So it's just, it's a big black hole. And so just bringing that up, that if that's what everybody wanted, 30 days. And then the other thing was on page 182, did we take in consideration Beach Theater? It's our only theater for theater signs for the marquee? Because they actually have 2, right? And it says for 1 theater sign.
The Beach Theater.
They have a variance for it?
I believe they went. Brendan might remember, but I think I remember hearing
They
it.
go for a variance for it?
They did get a variance for the
So
beach
they-
theater,
okay,
yes. They went
I
through that.
just wanted
yes.
to make sure of that. I don't think we're doing any other theaters for a while.
And I did just want to specify the signs in this section, 26.18, these are additional signs that are based on the use. They're not limited to a commercial message or not, but they would be allowed an additional sign as a theater use that would not be allowed to a non-theater use based on this, so.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the freestand, there's the it looked like the marquee, 5 feet.
Yes.
3 by 5, and then but it said per each theater, so that was the...
That would be a bonus sign, but in their case, they would still have needed a variance. That wouldn't have changed, but they did go, they were approved last year.
They used to have the 2 marquee signs here and then the 2 up top, so, okay.
I'm not seeing the change from 30 to 45. I'm on page 19.
It was 0 originally.
Which section?
Hang on, I gotta try to strike through.
Section E or KI?
Okay, so it was 45 days and 7 days following. Now it's 30 days and 2 days following.
But everything else is 2 days, like everything, which kind of makes sense. That's, the 2 days, I didn't really think there was an issue. I was just concerned about.
No, I'm just saying that's the change. I'm trying to understand where that change came from because I don't think it came from here.
No.
No, I don't think it did. That's what had been drafted by our consultant. We're happy to change it. I don't have any particular preference.
I don't think that needs to be changed in any way.
Let's go with what the council wants to.
So you want 40, back to 45 and 7, or was that the original?
I mean, I don't, if it's 2 everywhere else, then that's fine.
I think it's 2 everywhere else that I read. For all temporary signs, it's 2, and I think even special events are 2 days. So everything's 2 days. So the consistency, I think, would be good. The 45 days, I think, it should go back to that. Or to 0, I mean, because we didn't follow any, I mean, there's no state statute as well. So it was just in the candidate's book at one point, nowhere else.
$45 and 2 seems to make good common sense.
45,
It would
I'm
be,
good with 45.
any rational basis will support the numbers.
Well, we would be making any changes. It wouldn't be a change. The only thing is the 2 would change to conform with all the others.
Okay. That's defensible.
I'll stay with the 45.
Do we have any audience comments?
No comments.
Okay. Any comments, questions from the commission? Okay. Is there a motion to,
I'll make a motion to adopt final reading of ordinance 2025-10 as amended. Would that be correct?
As amended from the podium to incorporate the changes described by staff and by the mayor.
That.
Second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call?
Commissioner Ruznicki,
Yes.
Commissioner Maldonado,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next, we have items for discussion. The first one is 7A, Brownsfield designation for 75 Corey Avenue.
So this is a statutory requirement that we announced this prior to bringing it forward to you. This will be a resolution. It'll be on your next agenda. It's actually statutorily required to be 2 readings, and we will have the attorney for the request at the next meeting. Just to be clear, I know it was in the agenda report. This doesn't commit any kind of development. This is an expansion of a declaration that was performed back in 2022 for 6 parcels that made up the Corey Landings property. The owner of the entire East End now has acquired 2 additional properties. They are actively remediating them, and they are looking for the tax credits that are associated with that and some of the other benefits that come along with it. So we will bring that resolution forward. It's been prepared by their counsel, and it'll go through the 2 readings.
It doesn't approve any specific development plan. It's just a requirement that they have an end use of the property designated, even as of right end use, that would return the property to use and create, I think, a minimal 26 jobs. Yes. Which any of the as of right uses would do.
Okay. Questions, comments? Great discussion. Thank you. Next, we have the city manager's annual review.
Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners. If I can briefly address you and kind of highlight some of the contents of your packet that were published in the agenda. First, I just want to extend my heartfelt gratitude for having the opportunity to serve as your city manager. It has really been an honor this last year to work alongside such a dedicated team and really this wonderful community that my husband and I have been able to immerse ourselves in. And your support and collaboration has been invaluable, and I really do look forward to continuing to work together on our shared goals and implementing the Commission's policy direction and helping our community rebuild and be better. For purposes of just going on the record for the process, as part of my contract, there's a 12-month performance evaluation process for the city manager, and this process does include, as approved in the December 2024 meeting, a 360 evaluation, which was conducted anonymously by various staff members at all levels in the organization. Since I did complete an evaluation 6 months ago, I decided that because of the short time period, I essentially asked the same exact people or people in those positions to participate in the survey, so there wasn't a statistical variation that would swing in that short time period. And also each one of the commissioners was asked, with the exception of Commissioner Maldonado, who was appointed after that process had been completed. However, Commissioner Mulholland did participate, and all of your results are in the packet and have your name on them for public record based on Florida law. So just to highlight a few things, I do think the evaluation highlighted some themes that I heard from you to focus more attention and effort in the future. Some of those included continuous improvement in communication and follow-up from staff, continuing to invest in community engagement, cross-departmental collaboration, and consistent customer service excellence, as well as refining the organizational structure, which you're hoping to see in this budget process. I continue to address that. And I think most importantly is addressing infrastructure needs for the community. On the positive side, what I heard from you was that the commission did note accomplishments such as increased collaboration, even though we have some work to go, an authentic leadership style, sound staffing decisions, enhancing organizational effectiveness, very positive feedback on storm recovery efforts, increased staff responses citywide, and improved transparency and financial reporting. In the self-evaluation, I expressed my gratitude for the opportunity to lead the organization and highlighted the resiliency and teamwork, as well as the commitment demonstrated by the employees during my tenure. Despite the challenges posed by back-to-back hurricanes, I think we achieved many notable outcomes, including the implementation of a competitive pay plan that the commission had approved shortly before my arrival. We did complete many key infrastructure projects just based on recovery and rebuilding. And I think, and I've heard that the community is happy with the improvements in transparency and communication, which I'm committed to continuing. And to highlight, this evaluation includes goals for the next evaluation cycle. We're going to be working on continuous improvement and communications, decreasing the funding gap for critical infrastructure, implementing major organizational changes, aligning the strategic plan with budget goals, and maintaining actions that promote morale and strong performance. So with that, I did include a amendment request to my contract, which included the commission approving, which would be a contract amendment at a future meeting for a cost of living adjustment, the same as that is to be approved in the upcoming budget. And I would ask that that effective date also be the same date that the employees receive their increase, as well as an additional 1 week of paid time off in my contract amendment. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions or additional feedback.
Commissioners? Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to, it's kind of nice to hear you say it, you know, even though it's stuff that we should be saying. It's kind of reversed, but it's nice to hear because I do commend you for a lot that you have done. It's been a real rough year, I would say, for many people. But for those who are working and seeing everything, you're seeing everything from the whole city. Sometimes we only see what's happening in our house. So it takes a toll. I know a lot of your staff work and live here as well as you do. And I'm sure rebuilding isn't hard. So I just wanted to commend you on that because it's been, oh my gosh, I don't know, it's 3 years, I think. I can't even remember the year that everything kind of was very sour for a while. And then we think, or at least I thought as on the commission, everything's going to get better last year. And then we get hit with, you know, the unthinkable. So, you know, I do commend you on that. It's not an easy job, I'm sure.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's no doubt, even for people who aren't paying attention, that things are better in St. Pete Beach than they have been in the past. And I think you deserve the bulk of the credit for that. And so I know I regularly hear from residents things like, you know, I don't know, she moved from California, we weren't sure about her, but now that we see what's happened, everybody's pretty happy. So so thank you, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. You did a great job getting us through the hurricanes. I greatly appreciate that, and especially without having any processes in place. So that is definitely appreciative of that.
So we've only had brief 3, almost 4 weeks together, and I will tell you that, you know, you have helped me hit the ground running. I think that your accountability with your staff and your leadership exudes the kind of confidence and direction that we need here, and that I am certainly very appreciative of even your tutelage over this brief period. But I do commend you for the feedback that I've gotten from folks in District 4 and just that quick turn at how responsive you are to their needs as well. So thank you very much.
I will definitely say that's true. I mean, everyone says you respond, you know. Sometimes you might take another day, so I know people want it now, but it's because you're doing your due diligence and looking for the information. It's not that you're ignoring their request, you know. And I do want to add again that I know we've emphasized always on the storm, but we had an internal storm in the city that people don't realize. There's a lot going on between all the departments. So you were hit by 2 storms. You know, it was we had to find another city manager, right? And there was a lot that was being investigated and looked at, and then you come in, and then there's a physical storm, you know, to top it off. So I'm sure it wasn't easy. I would say, I wonder, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, is she going to like walk away? This is too much, you know, being hit by multiple storms in all means. So it's big.
So I wanted to speak primarily to our residents. Because the subject of compensation and, you know, the entire package comes up quite frequently, especially for the commission that generally gets to decide for the 3 charter officers, city clerk, city manager, and city attorney. And I'm not going to say anything that you haven't heard already. Somebody else says, like, well, how come we have the second or highest paid city manager in the county? We're only the 14th largest city out of 23. And I think part of those comments come because maybe you don't necessarily see everything that we get to see. And so I want to share some of those things that we see that maybe the general public doesn't see. But something that the general public would have seen is how some of our sister cities have weathered these storms. And it wasn't like us. I'm not saying that our process was perfect. I remember those town halls where we were packed every single week for months on end, commission meetings full. It wasn't perfect. But to what Commissioner Reznicki said, the moment that Frances Robustelli stepped in, that moment in time, she was the 3rd city manager in 9 months. The first one didn't leave necessarily in the most auspicious circumstances. We had a commission that had resigned en masse. So yeah, there was a lot of turmoil. And for anyone who's, so I don't know why you stepped into that. Because at some point you have to ask yourself, is the money worth the squeeze? I mean, really the amount, would you do the job for any amount of money stepping into that situation? And that was a mountain to climb that would have been a challenge and near insurmountable for most people. And so I do commend you for having done that. And that is before we got hit by 2 historic storms. And then you throw that on top of it. You have turmoil in the staff, in the departments, complete reorganization from ground up, turmoil in the commission, instability in the city in every single aspect, and to step into that. And then just have, in your 2nd, 3rd month here, 2 historic storms, and then have to deal with everything on top of that. And so I want to draw just your attention to a couple things that you may not have seen. I don't remember the last city manager that lived in the city. The last city manager that actually invested, you know, their livelihood and their time and energy by buying a house here, especially one that was, you know, hurricane damage. We haven't seen that before. This, to me, speaks as somebody that's committed to being a part of the community, not just working here, but actually being part of it. And you've heard that, you know, the response time, just actually having a response. You know, you would think that isn't something that'd be part of the job, but we haven't had that experience certainly in the past. Frances has subjected herself to 2 360 evaluations since she started. I can tell you the previous city managers I worked with refused. They didn't want it. They did not want to be evaluated by their peers. Now, to me, the city manager works with the commission, right? But they also work with the directors, with the staff. We have, if you saw the budget meeting, we have 157 staff, right, that they're responsible for. So why would you not want to have feedback? We as a commission, you as the residents, why would you not want to have feedback from the people that daily interact with the city manager? I certainly want to, and we asked for that, and we were refused. Frances said, heck, do it twice. Vinny was here just a couple minutes ago. And Commissioner Reznicki, you've been here and here. Have you ever heard Vinny say a positive thing about the flooding in the Don Cesar neighborhood?
And
Okay.
let's say response time there, I mean, how much does Vinny?
And Vinny sends a lot of emails and a lot of text messages, and he specifically took the time just to come here and say thank you, and the thanks belongs to you and the staff. Just a couple of other things that you probably don't see. So the city manager has a discretionary fund that they're allowed to use. They can spend up to $25,000 pretty much for anything they want. They don't have to come to the commission for approval. We had 2 items today on the docket that city manager could have just pushed through, never asked us for it, and that's just 2 today. And I've seen one almost every single commission meeting for the last year. And I can tell you that hasn't been the case in the past, because in the past, you can just look at the public records requests, how many times we've had 24,995, 24,500, right? Things that just got snuck in just under the radar. And that to me speaks to a level of transparency and respect for this, just respect and stewardship for what she's been entrusted with as far as the city resources and funds. I mean, that speaks to me to something that she does not have to do, yet she still does it. And so I thought it'd be important to point out. And so, really, primarily to me, the fact that you've chosen to move your family here and invest in this community speaks louder than most other things. And so for that, thank you. And I just wanted our residents to just hear about some of those things that go on behind the scenes that you may not necessarily see, and to articulate why I, for one, I don't have a problem with the request that you've made. I would wholeheartedly endorse it, and I'd love to have you here for another year and 5 years and 10 years. And this is where you choose to retire. It's good by me.
Thank you.
So, but with that, we do need consensus from the commission. If you are all right with the request and you want to move that forward, or?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Commissioner Robinson, a discussion item on beach.
I just want to bring up the fact that did have a couple residents bring up the issue with the separating of the 3 elements with the beach ordinance, being that the last 2 are a bit intertwined, and whether it would be better served for, for customary use and what we have with what the hotels, their beach use, as well as the residents' beach use, and how those 2 can be shared and be consistent, and whether, separating out the wildlife made sense, but whether or not keeping the other 2 separate or doing them both together would be of more benefit. That way there's consistency. I mean, we had talks on umbrellas. We're going to have umbrellas on both sides. We're going to have different talks on it. It kind of makes sense to put it both together so that there is consistency with whether it be, alcohol on the beach or umbrella size, or whether they're tents or umbrellas, whatever. It did make sense in that regards to put those both together instead of separating them out. At least we get consistency between both sides.
Just so, it was proposed to go into 3. Which 2 do you want to put together? Or you propose?
Well, basically keep the wildlife out. That really was a total
Okay.
separate, and put the other 2 together.
I'm not sure I agree.
And I'm not sure either.
Okay. That's why I wanted to bring it up for discussion.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons was recommended from our city attorney's office, which I'll let you elaborate, but because there was some consternation over certain particular parts of the ordinance, if the ordinance gets challenged, we lose the whole ordinance in its entirety, not just the portion being challenged.
Okay.
And so we were worried we wanted to get as much through as we could that we knew would not be challenged, and then leave the most complex part to discuss separately to see if we could get some agreement with the stakeholders as we move that ordinance forward to minimize the potential of a challenge. So that was one of the primary reasons for doing so as well.
Okay, I don't believe that was stated as such during the conversation as to the, the actual reason they were divided.
Not at the
That
Monday
was
meeting,
not
but at the previous one. Yeah. Because, you remember, I was not for splitting it up at all.
We also have Senate Bill 180 now, too.
Now we have
It's come up
Yeah.
since then. So we're doing a review of the ordinance for impacts from Senate Bill 180. It will not impact the behavioral type ordinances. It would only interfere with development. So we're making sure that the ordinance is properly oriented.
Thank you. With that, we move on to staff reports. City Clerk. Thank you. City Manager.
No further report.
Thank you. City Attorney.
Well, I just wanted to let you all know that on Friday, I'm going to the Florida Municipal Attorneys Association Conference, and one of the topics will be noise ordinances. Entitled, "The Noise Ordinances, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly." And there's also updates on federal contracting requirements, which have changed under the new administration, as well as the new state legislation. So we'll be discussing Senate Bill 180 and getting ideas from other city attorneys at that conference, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Thank you, sir. District 4.
Yeah, I just want to pass on that I'm keeping all of the District 4 boards and committee members. I've had the opportunity to meet with them. They're still excited about serving and look forward to continuing serving. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. District 3.
Just to be an alert for District 3, I've had meetings with Bell Vista and the Don Cesar. They've had summer meetings, but not everybody does summer meetings. So without getting so from Lido, Boca Ciega, Marabella, and one of the condos, instead of having them separate, I will announce maybe a meet at the park kind of meet for people who might have something, especially before budgets are approved. So I will communicate that out, what day would be best or time, because I know it's hot. But we don't have the Don Vista to use, unfortunately. So, but I'll put it out there when we get a good date. Thank you.
Thank you. District 2.
Just wanted to say that I went to the FDOT meeting for Blinds Pass, and I wish we had that $5.2 million for our infrastructure. It was interesting to see what they're doing, and just envious of wishing we had that money. And if there's any way we could reroute that to us and not to Blinds Pass would be great. Other than that, I've got my St. Pete Beach library hours on August 5th from 5 to 5:45.
Thank you. District 1.
So like Commissioner Robinson, I attended the FDOT meeting about medians on Blind Pass and a additional crosswalk that's actually in Treasure Island, but will affect the folks that live on the north end of the beach. It's at the end of the day, it's relatively inconsequential, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me. And I also wanted to say that I have spoken to the folks that own the old Winn-Dixie grocery store building in District 1. They are actively looking for tenants. Nothing is currently in the works, so no rumors, unfounded or otherwise. And then also have heard that potential in District 1 that both Woody's and Willie's may be on their way back. Woody's under new ownership, Willie's under the same ownership, and I'm sure it's going to be a little bit of a road for rebuilding, but I know those are both big favorites for District 1, so that's exciting news, and that's all I got.
That same location?
Same location.
Thank you. So I'm actually just going to ask the city manager to help me out here. So we've got long overdue beach renourishment finally happening. If you wouldn't mind giving us some details on that, the situation with Publix, if you have any details to share, as well as the Bayway Butcher Shop looking at bringing in a grocery store.
The Bayway Butcher Shop got their permits.
Thank you.
They're in construction. I spoke to him last week. They're anticipating opening in November.
Excellent.
And that will be on Gulf Boulevard at about, what is that, about 64th, 60s, yeah, something like that.
Just past Larry's, right?
Yep, yeah, right next to Larry's Ice Cream.
Looking for beach renourishment right now. I'm sorry I didn't give you an update. I do know that the county has approved to move forward with beach renourishment for the entire barrier islands, and the approximate value to St. Pete Beach is about $1.2 million, and I believe it's going to be in sometime in August, so I will get back to you and be able to report. It's a very, very quick turnaround time. I think they're going to accomplish the entire barrier island in about 10 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, all the permits were ready to go. Army Corps of Engineer had those. They just didn't pull the trigger.
Yes. And then what was the third?
Publix. Or that entire shopping center. Do we know if Publix is doing anything?
So the last update, we met with the property manager probably a little over a month ago, and they were exploring whether or not they were going to just remodel in the interim, or they also had a project to rebuild the Publix, similar to the TI concept. So it would be elevated with parking. And that was the last we met with them. And I've asked staff to follow up both with their media and the Publix media and the property manager to find out if we can get any more information.
A question on that. Did they mention whether they were going to address a storm? As I remember, one time they wanted to propose something there, but there was an issue with stormwater, the drainage.
That's one of the reasons they met with us, and we did talk about how they would need to address the stormwater on the new project.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just sharing updates on those two items
Yes.
next time, that'd be great. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
All right, good job, team.